Picture this. You are flying for the first time. Since your surgery, your bag is packed exactly the way your doctor told you to pack it: your oxygen concentrator, your insulin, your compression sleeve. And still, the officer starts pulling everything out, piece by piece, in front of everyone waiting behind you. And you feel like you did something wrong, when in reality, you simply never learned the exemptions that already exist for travelers over 65. Because in 2026, there are 7 medical exemptions most seniors have ever heard of. Exemptions that can stop TSA from touching your bag at all. And today, on this channel, we are breaking down every single one of them so you can walk through security with confidence instead of confusion. Let us begin. And if any of what you are about to hear sounds unfamiliar, that is exactly the point, because most of these protections are rarely explained clearly, even though they exist for exactly this reason. Before we go further, if flying after 70 has ever felt more stressful than it should, subscribe to this channel, because every week we break down exactly what security officers expect from senior travelers, so you never feel caught off guard again. And if you know someone who is flying soon, send them this video. It might save them from an unpleasant morning at the airport. Exemption 7. Medically necessary liquids. Exempt from the 100 milliliter rule. Most travelers know the standard rule: 100 milliliters per container. Everything sealed in a small clear bag, and anything larger gets thrown away without discussion. But seniors managing chronic conditions are often carrying liquid medications that go far beyond that limit, and here is what most people do not realize. Medically necessary liquids are exempt from the standard restriction: insulin, liquid nutrition supplements, saline solutions, eye drops used for glaucoma, and prescription cough syrups can all travel in quantities larger than 100 milliliters. As long as they are declared at the checkpoint before screening begins, the key word here is declared. You cannot simply hope the officer notices a label. You have to speak up the moment you approach the line. Tell the officer clearly that you are carrying medically necessary liquids and be ready to separate them from the rest of your belongings. For a closer look, officers may test the liquid using a small device or ask you to open the container, and this is completely normal. It does not mean you did anything wrong. It simply means the system is doing its job. The mistake most seniors make is staying quiet, assuming the prescription label will speak for itself. But silence is what triggers confusion, and confusion is what leads to your bag being searched item by item. So the rule is simple. If it is medically necessary and over the standard limit, declare it early. Keep it separated, and let the officer do a quick check instead of a full search. One more detail that catches many seniors off guard: frozen or gel-based medications sometimes trigger a secondary check simply because the scanning equipment cannot read through certain packaging. This is not a sign of trouble. It is a routine step, and staying calm through it usually means the whole process wraps up in under a minute. Keeping medications in their original pharmacy packaging rather than transferring them into travel-sized containers also helps enormously, because the label itself becomes part of your explanation, and officers spend less time asking questions when the answer is already printed clearly in front of them. Exemption 6. Private screening requests for seniors with cognitive or medical needs. For travelers managing memory issues, chronic pain, anxiety, or mobility limitations, standing in a crowded line while a stranger unpacks your bag in public can feel overwhelming. and many seniors do not know that they have the right to request private screening. This exemption exists specifically for situations where public screening would be difficult due to a medical or cognitive condition, and it applies whether the concern is physical, like joint pain from standing too long, or cognitive, like difficulty following rapid instructions. Requesting private screening is simple. You tell the officer directly that you would like a private screening area, and you are allowed to bring a travel companion with you if you have one. The private area usually means fewer people watching, more time to explain your situation, and a calmer pace overall. This does not mean the screening becomes less thorough. It means it becomes less stressful, and stress is often what causes seniors to forget documentation or fumble through their bag, making the process take even longer. The exemption also covers situations where a senior is traveling with a caregiver, in which case the caregiver can usually remain present during the private screening. So if standing in a busy line while your belongings are examined publicly sounds difficult, remember, you do not have to accept that experience. You can simply ask for privacy, and in most major airports, that request is granted without hesitation. Another point worth knowing: if you have a condition that affects communication, such as hearing loss or difficulty processing rapid verbal instructions, mention this at the very start. Officers can slow down, use written instructions, or repeat directions more clearly once they understand the situation. This exemption is not limited to physical disabilities either. Seniors managing anxiety, panic-related conditions, or early-stage memory concerns are equally entitled to request a calmer, more private setting. The goal of this exemption is simple. It exists so that a medical or cognitive challenge never turns into a public and stressful experience. Exemption 5. Insulin pumps, CGMs, and diabetic supplies get special TSA protection. Diabetic travelers face a unique challenge because their medical equipment often includes sharp objects, electronic devices, and liquid medication all in one bag, and many seniors worry that carrying syringes or an insulin pump will automatically raise suspicion. But the opposite is true. Insulin, syringes, pen needles, lancets, glucose meters, continuous glucose monitors, and insulin pumps are all explicitly allowed in carry-on luggage, and they do not need to be removed from your bag for a separate check the way laptops sometimes do. The important step is informing the officer before screening starts. Simply say that you are diabetic and carrying diabetes-related supplies. This single sentence changes how the entire screening proceeds. Officers are trained to handle these situations carefully, and many will offer additional assistance once they know. Insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors should not go through the standard X-ray machine because the radiation can affect their calibration. Instead, request a manual inspection for these specific devices. This is your right, and officers are required to accommodate it. Cooling packs used to keep insulin at a safe temperature are also permitted, which brings extra peace of mind for longer flights. And for travelers wearing an insulin pump continuously, mentioning this before you even step into the scanning line rather than after the alarm sounds keeps the entire interaction short and calm. The biggest mistake diabetic travelers make is trying to hide their supplies at the bottom of the bag, hoping to avoid questions. But hiding creates suspicion, while openly declaring your condition creates cooperation. So pack your diabetic supplies where they are easy to access, mention your condition early, and request manual screening for your electronic devices, this small habit can save you significant time and stress. It also helps to carry a brief note from your physician confirming your diagnosis. Especially if you are traveling internationally, some countries have different expectations around medical equipment, and a printed note removes any ambiguity immediately. Glucagon kits, used for severe low blood sugar emergencies, are also permitted, along with alcohol swabs and disposal containers for used needles. Seniors sometimes worry that a sharps container will look alarming, but a clearly labeled container actually reassures officers rather than concerning them, because it shows the supplies are being handled responsibly. Exemption 4. Prescription cooling packs for temperature-sensitive medications. Many seniors travel with medications that must stay cold, insulin being the most common example, but also certain biologics, hormone treatments, and specialty prescriptions. And a common fear is that ice packs or gel packs will be confiscated because they resemble a gel or liquid. Here is the exemption. Cooling packs used specifically to keep medically necessary items at a safe temperature are allowed through security. Even if they are partially frozen, gel-based, or liquid in form, the rule that applies to ordinary liquids simply does not apply here, as long as the purpose is medical. However, there is a detail seniors often miss. The cooling pack itself may need to be screened separately, meaning you should not bury it deep inside your bag. Keep it in an easily accessible pouch, along with the medication it is protecting, and be ready to explain its purpose the moment you are asked. Officers may also ask to see the medication that requires cooling, so keeping the prescription label visible or carrying a printed note from your doctor makes the process faster. Another detail worth knowing: if your cooling pack is completely frozen solid, it may be treated differently than a partially melted one. So, if possible, let it soften slightly before your flight. This small adjustment avoids unnecessary questions. In short, if you are keeping medication cold for medical reasons, you are protected. You simply need to keep it visible, keep it labeled, and be ready to explain it in one sentence. It also helps to know that reusable gel packs, the kind that stay soft even when cold, tend to move through screening faster than fully frozen ice packs, because the scanning image is easier for officers to interpret. If you are unsure which type your pharmacy provided, calling ahead and asking is a small step that can prevent a longer conversation at the checkpoint later. And if you are traveling with more than one temperature-sensitive medication, keeping them together in a single labeled pouch rather than scattered across your bag makes the entire explanation faster and clearer. Exemption 3. CPAP and oxygen equipment do not count toward carry-on limits. This exemption surprises more seniors than almost any other on this list, because many assume their CPAP machine or portable oxygen concentrator takes up one of their allowed carry-on items. It does not. Medical devices like CPAP machines, oxygen concentrators, and nebulizers are classified separately from personal luggage, meaning you can bring your standard carry-on bag, your personal item, and your medical device without losing space or being forced to choose between them. This device also does not need to be placed in the overhead bin. It can stay with you under the seat, or in some cases on your lap, depending on airline policy. At the security checkpoint, these devices are typically screened separately from your other bags, and you are allowed to keep them close during the process. If your oxygen concentrator uses a battery, Airlines usually require documentation showing the device is FAA approved for use on board. Keeping a printed approval letter or manufacturer certification with your equipment prevents delays. Seniors traveling with CPAP machines often make one small mistake, packing the machine inside checked luggage to save space. But this is risky. Checked bags can be lost, delayed, or handled roughly, and a medical device that keeps you breathing safely overnight should never be separated from you during travel. So the rule here is simple. Your CPAP or oxygen equipment does not count against your carry-on limit. It stays with you, it gets screened separately, and it should never go into checked baggage. It is also worth carrying your CPAP in a clearly labeled medical device bag rather than a generic carry-on bag, because many officers immediately recognize the labeled bags and adjust their screening approach accordingly. If you are unsure whether your specific oxygen concentrator model is approved for your flight, checking with the airline at least a few days beforehand avoids any last-minute surprises, and printing that approval confirmation rather than relying only on an email on your phone keeps everything simple and ready to show at a moment's notice. Exemption 2, Mobility Scooter and Electric Wheelchair Screening Assistance. Traveling with a mobility scooter or an electric wheelchair introduces a level of complexity that most airport processes are not naturally built for. Batteries, moving parts, and the sheer size of the equipment can make screening feel intimidating. But airports have a dedicated process specifically for this, and it exists to protect both your equipment and your dignity. When you arrive with a mobility device, you are entitled to assistance throughout the entire security process. This includes help transferring to a screening chair if needed, so your equipment can be inspected separately. Officers are trained to handle this transfer respectfully, and you are allowed to remain seated during much of the inspection. Batteries in these devices are almost always allowed, but it helps enormously to know your battery type in advance. Most modern scooters use sealed lead-acid or lithium-ion batteries, both of which are generally accepted, though lithium batteries above a certain capacity may require documentation from the manufacturer. Keeping this paperwork in an easily accessible pouch on your device saves considerable time. Another detail seniors overlook: notify the airline in advance that you are traveling with a mobility device. This allows the airport to prepare the appropriate screening equipment and staff before you even arrive. Walking in unannounced is not a problem. But it does mean a slightly longer wait while arrangements are made on the spot. The bottom line here is this: mobility devices are fully accommodated. Assistance is available every step of the way, and asking for help is not a burden. It is exactly what the system is designed for. If you are traveling alone, it also helps to arrive a little earlier than usual, because the transfer and inspection process for larger equipment naturally takes a few extra minutes, and rushing through it only adds unnecessary pressure. Many airports also offer curbside or gate assistance specifically for mobility device users, and requesting this service in advance through the airline means someone is already expecting you when you arrive, rather than searching for help once you are already at the counter. Exemption 1, Medical Documentation Card that prevents full bag searches. This final exemption is the one that ties every other exemption together, and it is the single most underused tool among senior travelers. A medical documentation card, sometimes called a disability notification card, is a simple printed card that lists your medical conditions, the devices or medications you are carrying, and a brief explanation of why each item is necessary. This card is not a legal requirement, but it changes the entire tone of your screening experience. Instead of an officer discovering an insulin pump, a cooling pack, and loose medication one item at a time, and having to ask questions about each one individually, you hand them a single card that explains everything up front. This dramatically reduces the chance of a full manual search because officers are trained to move efficiently, and clear documentation removes the guesswork that normally leads to caution. Creating this card is simple. List your name, your medical conditions in plain language, the specific items you are carrying, insulin, CPAP, oxygen, cooling packs, and a short note stating that these items are medically necessary for travel. Keep it printed, not just saved on your phone, because a physical card can be handed over instantly without asking an officer to wait while you unlock a screen. Present this card at the very beginning of the screening process, not after questions have already started. Timing matters here because the entire purpose of the card is to prevent questions before they happen. Seniors who use this simple tool consistently report shorter screening times, fewer items removed from their bags, and a noticeably calmer interaction overall. It costs nothing to create, it takes 5 minutes to prepare, and it may be the single most effective exemption on this entire list. Some seniors also choose to laminate their card, since it tends to be reused on every trip, and a durable card survives being pulled in and out of a bag far better than a plain sheet of paper. If you are traveling with a spouse or a caregiver who manages your medications, it is worth preparing 2 copies, one for you and one for them, so that either person can present it without delay, and updating the card whenever your prescriptions change ensures the information officers see is always accurate, which keeps the entire exemption working exactly the way it is designed to. 7 exemptions, all of them real, all of them designed specifically to make travel easier for seniors managing medical needs, medically necessary liquids beyond the standard limit, private screening for comfort and dignity, full protection for diabetic supplies, cooling packs for temperature-sensitive medication, CPAP and oxygen equipment that never counts against your carry-on limit, dedicated assistance for mobility scooters and electric wheelchairs, and a simple documentation card that can prevent a full search before it ever begins. None of these exemptions are secret. They are written into official airport security guidelines, but almost nobody explains them clearly. And that gap in knowledge is exactly what causes stress at the checkpoint. The difference between a smooth screening and a frustrating one is rarely about luck. It is almost always about preparation, knowing what you are entitled to, and knowing how to communicate it clearly the moment you approach the line. That is the entire purpose of exemptions like these. They exist so that a medical condition does not turn into a travel obstacle. And yet, year after year, the same scenes repeat at checkpoints across the country, a senior standing quietly while an officer unpacks bag after bag, not because the traveler broke any rule, but because nobody ever explained what they were allowed to do differently. That gap between what the rules actually say and what most travelers believe the rules say is exactly where stress lives. Close that gap, and the entire airport experience changes. You stop bracing for a search, and you start walking through security the same way any confident traveler does, calmly, prepared, and fully aware of what you are entitled to. This is not about memorizing every regulation word for word. It is about knowing the handful of exemptions that actually apply to your situation and being ready to state them clearly the moment you are asked. That alone puts you ahead of the vast majority of travelers your age, most of whom are still learning these lessons the hard way, one uncomfortable screening at a time.